I'm Jack Bradley, in for Steve Lance. And after signing 2 executive orders and 1 memorandum, President Trump today speaking to reporters at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Palm Beach, Florida. He started the conversation by defending DOGE's efforts to downsize the federal government.
People at DOGE, these are young, often young, but super brilliant people, incredible computer scientists and other things, and they're finding levels of fraud and waste and abuse like I think nobody ever thought possible.
The first executive order Trump signed seeks to expand access to in vitro fertilization, or IVF. The measure directs the Domestic Policy Council to help reduce the cost of IVF and other fertility treatments. The second executive order outlined the oversight functions of the Office of Management and Budget. Trump also signed a memorandum mandating that federal agencies uncover waste, fraud, and abuses that have been reported. And on trade, Trump floated the possibility of a near 25% tariff on imports of cars, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals starting in April. U.S. officials agreed to officially improve diplomatic relations with Russia. The goal? To bring a permanent end to the war in Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the takeaways from today's talks in Saudi Arabia.
Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one.
High-ranking U.S. officials met with Russian counterparts in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. This comes just days after President Trump had a surprising phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin about ending the fighting in Ukraine.
President Trump is determined to move very quickly. We just had a head of state phone call, the first in years, and here we are less than a week later.
During Tuesday's meeting, Russian and U.S. officials agreed on multiple points to improve relations and end the fighting in Ukraine. One is to re-establish the functionality of the embassies in Washington and Moscow. The second point is that both countries will appoint a team of people who will negotiate how to end the fighting in Ukraine. The U.S. and Russia will also examine how to work together after the fighting in Europe ends. Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggests that the West will have to lift sanctions on Russia to make progress in the peace talks.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. And there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed.
After the talks in Saudi Arabia, Russia's foreign minister suggested that relations between Washington and Moscow are already starting to improve.
I believe the conversation was very useful. We did not just listen, but we heard each other, and I have reason to believe that the American side has become more aware of our position.
While visiting Turkey on Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky once again criticized the talks between Russian and U.S. officials.
You can talk about anything, but no decision can be made without Ukraine on how to end the war in Ukraine.
Zelensky went as far as to postpone a previously planned trip to Saudi Arabia. He suggested that's to avoid his visit being linked to the talks between U.S. and Russian officials. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
As the U.S. is brokering that peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, will peace pull Russia away from China? Joining me now to discuss the analysis of these latest developments is Amin Tarzi. He's the Director of Middle East Studies at the Marine Corps University in Virginia. Amin Tarzi, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the U.S. is appointing a team to broker a deal with Ukraine and Russia that would be enduring and acceptable to all parties involved. What could that look like?
Well, the fact that we hear that means that there will be seats for Europeans, potentially, and I think the Secretary mentioned that they will have a seat, if nothing else, because they have sanctions imposed on on Russia, and it will be impossible to move forward, and obviously with Ukraine as well. So I think right now you see a movement. This was the beginning of a process, and I think at least from what you hear is that the process is not exclusively between the Russian Federation and the United States of America, but rather it is a process which will be inclusive. That's what I hear from it.
Mm-hmm. With Ukraine included, although Ukraine was not part of this meeting in Saudi Arabia, the meeting between U.S. and Russian officials here ends a 3-year freeze in speaking with Putin. I want to play a quick soundbite from Secretary Rubio from today. Take a look.
President Trump is determined to move very quickly. We just had a head of state phone call, the first in years, and here we are less than a week later at the highest level of the U.S. and Russian government, and we expect to continue to drive that pace to not only end the war, but then to unlock what could be very productive and stabilizing relationships going forward.
What would a productive relationship look like at this point?
Well, again, this goes back to President Trump as a candidate. Trump, he was saying that he will end this war. Sometimes he even said 24 hours. So the speed of it is not a surprise. It was one of the agendas, and it's being acted upon. And I think one reason that it was only the U.S. and Russia with the Saudi Arabian government as a host to open up a dialogue. There was words from both, I think, Secretary Rubio and from the Russian side that this is about investment and about cessation of sanctions. All of that, I think, would be possible and feasible once we know what sort of a agreement we have. It may not be a full peace meeting, Ukraine getting all its land that it lost since 2014, or in the second invasion in 2022. But what would it look like? It is a frozen conflict, meaning that Ukraine one day will get their territory back, or it is just a cessation of hostilities. And as I said, that will determine investment opportunities. It's not just by the U.S. It's international corporations would not come into a place where they believe that the situation is not sustainable for long-term investment.
We know China is the main supplier of Russia's war machine. We've known that since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, according to U.S. officials. And it's also critical that the Chinese economy supplies Russia's economy. Would this deal that's to be brokered help pull Russia away from the Chinese Communist Party?
I think behind all of the U.S. attempts to have a normalized relationship with Russia, bring Russia back into the fold of, if you would, at least, if not an alliance, but an agreement between the United States and Russia, is to, with this hope to pull the Jews politically, pull Russia away from China. Personally, my own view is that's not going to happen. I think the relationship between China and Russia is much more solid, and they both are authoritarian countries, meaning that their policies do not change because of an election. So I think it would be a shorter term. Russia would like to have relations with the U.S. Their economy is suffering immensely. This will be a time for Russia to, at least, if nothing else, at least have a time to regroup, rearm. But I don't think this will affect Chinese-Russian relationship in the near future because of the issue of trust, the issue of longevity of the relationship. And those things we have suffered in the last, I would say, several decades. The U.S. has not been very steadfast in relationship, whether good or bad, with a country. And that I think will come to haunt us as a country in the long run.
Ukrainian President Zelensky wants NATO membership. He wants to regain the lost territory in the war. Here's a soundbite from National Security Advisor Mike Waltz from Saudi Arabia today.
This needs to be a permanent end to the war and not a temporary end as we've seen in the past. We know just the practical reality is that there is going to be some discussion of territory, and there's going to be discussion of security guarantees. So what compromises will both sides have to make here?
In a realist theory that Russia will not give up territory, specifically nothing that they gained in 2014, or most likely not most of what they have gained right now. So that is the sad point for Ukraine. Security guarantees are important because Ukraine, without security guarantees, this would be a temporary arrangement. The question is, what are those? For Ukraine and most of European partners of ours, that is NATO membership. I don't think that's on the table. I think that you have heard it very clearly from the U.S. side. And frankly, even if you look at it at NATO as a whole, never in NATO's history has NATO invited and accepted a member with disputed boundaries. So the security guarantees have to come in a different form. whether that is a UN mission, whether that's an EU mission. U.S. has stated, I think, unequivocally that there will be no U.S. troops, but that doesn't mean there's no U.S. guarantees in forms of military support, in form of political support, agreements with Russia if the relationship with Moscow becomes even better.
Amin Tarzi, thank you very much for your insight here today.
You're very welcome. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
The Senate is back in session today, and today the Senate Majority Leader moving to advance 3 of Trump's nominees and the president's legislative agenda. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, joins us live from the Capitol. Luis, good evening. More confirmation votes expected today. What can you tell us about today's agenda?
Of course, Jack. Well, we already had the first confirmation vote of the day. That was the vote to confirm Howard Lutnick to be the next Secretary of Commerce. It was a 51 to 45 vote right now. It's still open, so those 4 senators who have not yet submitted their votes can do so before the end of this executive session. Earlier today, Jack, we saw Senate Majority Leader John Thune open this executive session. And why is that important? Because that allows him to also invoke cloture on the nomination of Kash Patel to become the next director of the FBI. The clock has started ticking, so we expect to see a full Senate floor vote on Kash Patel on Thursday. And later today, we're also expecting to see a Senate vote on Kelly Loeffler to be the next head of the Small Business Administration.
Very interesting, and we know that it's very uncommon for these Senate picks to not be confirmed in the Senate by a president. Last time it happened was under George H.W. Bush. But as far as the latest news on the reconciliation process and the tensions between the House and Senate, what's the latest on this?
Of course, well, one of the things that we were expecting, and now we can confirm, Jack, is that Senate Majority Leader John Thune has placed in the docket of discussion of this executive session the budget resolution approved by the Senate's Budget Committee last week. Now, this is a different budget resolution than the one that the House of Representatives is working on. The one that the Senate passed last week includes about $300 billion for border security, defense, and immigration issues. It does not include tax cuts or an increase of the debt ceiling like the House of Representatives version has. I spoke with Senator John Kennedy, the Republican from Louisiana, and I asked him whether he preferred the Senate or the House to take the lead on this process. Let's listen to what he had to say. In the reconciliation process, do you want to see the Senate take the lead in this process, or see the House play out its version?
It matters not to me. I just want to pass a bill. I don't care whether we do 1 bill or 2 bills. What I don't want to happen is for this relationship to become antagonistic. The Senate is very different from the House. The politics are different.
Now, it's important to note that the House of Representatives, their budget resolution is looking to cut about $2 trillion in government spending. And here's where the confirmation of Howard Lutnick comes into play, because the next Secretary of Commerce for President Trump's administration will be in charge of overseeing the implementation of tariffs, and that is President Trump's plan right now. And of course, Senate Republicans and House Republicans have bought into the idea that they can make up for the cuts, the revenue that the federal government is going to receive from cutting government spending through the implementation of tariffs. And as we saw and heard from Senator John Kennedy, Republicans, and they've been saying this, Trump has been saying it doesn't matter 1 bill, 2 bill, they just want to get that legislative agenda through, which would include up to $2 trillion in tax cuts, but $4.5 trillion allocated to extend the Trump tax cuts from his first administration. Back to you, Jack.
Luis, thank you very much for that update. The White House emphasizes that Elon Musk is an advisor and has no actual authority to make decisions. That's according to a court filing submitted on Monday. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Monday evening, the White House filed in a court filing saying that Elon Musk is a senior White House advisor and does not have any decision-making power. Joshua Fisher, the director of the Office of Administration at the White House, explains in the filing, quote, "Like other senior White House advisors, Mr. Musk has no actual or formal authority to make government decisions himself." It continues stating that Musk is an employee of the White House and not an employee of DOGE or the USDS, and that Elon Musk can only give advice to the president or carry out the president's directives. This information was also written on an additional court filing made by the Department of Justice. And the filing was made in a case against Elon Musk by the Attorneys General of Arizona, New Mexico, and several other states. The lawsuit is alleging that the power and authority that Elon Musk has is unconstitutional because Musk was not confirmed by the U.S. Senate. After coming into office, President Trump has put Elon Musk in charge of weeding out any wasteful government spending. Since then, DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, has been quickly auditing different government agencies and posting some of their findings online. On the agency's website, they said that since they started as of February 17th, they estimate they have saved $55 billion. And Elon Musk has been hinting that DOGE might be going to Fort Knox at some time in the near future. He did hint that they might want to try to implement some kind of live streaming of the audit or maybe a tour of Fort Knox. He did not specifically say yet. Fort Knox is where many gold reserves are kept by the federal government, and reportedly, Fort Knox has not been audited since 1953. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.